Live from Johannesburg, I'm Tula Sizwe Simelane. As mining executives, Labour and government concluded the Mine Health and Safety Summit, 5 miners were killed while doing their jobs. That brings the total of mine deaths up to 74 this year. There has been a steady decline in mine deaths in recent years, but since the end of 2017, there's been a sharp spike. The Mineral Resources Department statement on the matter cites lack of focus, complacency, and poor supervision among the reasons. That's basically people not doing their jobs as miners go into the earth to die for minerals. So are we knowingly sending mine workers to their deaths? That's my question for the panel tonight. What's yours? You can contact us on 011-759-6340. Or you can tweet us on the hashtag #TonightWithJaneDutton. But first, Devon has your news at this hour. Devon?
We'll start with that terrible road carnage, Tulis. Thank you very much. Well, the Limpopo Transport Department saying the death toll from the multi-vehicle accident has risen to 27. Its MEC is calling on SANRAL and the national government to improve roads in the province. It's understood one of the vehicles involved is a taxi which was travelling from Limpopo to Tembisa. Some survivors have been airlifted to hospitals in Polokwane and Pretoria.
This is not a tragic but a disaster that has happened to the people of Limpopo. Because what has happened was the truck was traveling N1 North. Unfortunately, there was a tire burst in the front right. The next thing, it went over to the other oncoming traffic. And the 4 other vehicles, unfortunately, were involved in that accident. And one of the oncoming traffic was a taxi, as it was already reported. And unfortunately, as you have said, more than 20 people are considered, but we're still here, we're still checking indeed whether the number is correct or not. But as a province of Limpopo, we are shattered, we are traumatized.
Cheryl Zondi has sent out a statement expressing gratitude for the support she's received. She's the first witness in the trial of Nigerian pastor Timothy Amotosho, the televangelist who stands accused of rape and human trafficking. Zondi says all rape victims should be given the same support. Meanwhile, a group calling themselves Nelson Mandela Bay Citizens says it's going to shut down Amotosho's Jesus Dominion International Church.
The church is at the center of all these atrocities. We wouldn't be here if this church was not here. I'm talking particularly the building. That is why we must shut this church down. Human trafficking, rape, all these things, they flow from the church. As a result, we feel that it is very important that we must come and demonstrate, even to the members of the church who, in our view, are no longer controlled by their minds, but they worship cult instead of the Almighty.
The Free State will be the first to cut off analog transmission on the 31st of December this year. Over 390,000 set-top boxes are expected to be delivered to the province and to the Northern Cape. Well, the move comes after years of delays in the country's digital migration project. Government's new deadline for the completion of the transition is July 2020.
Based on the activities plan and the resources we have, analog switch off will occur in South Africa in July 2020, the latest. However, we'll work harder to do it earlier if it's possible. We will also follow with the Northern Cape shortly, which is earmarked for the 31st of March 2019. The work in the Northern Cape will be carried out concurrently with the Northwest.
We'll have more news at 9. Tulis.
Thank you, Devin. The 2018 Health and Safety Summit has emphasized the need for urgency in improving mine health and safety standards. But are mining stakeholders really committed to addressing these issues in the sector? Miners are falling sick from inadequate protection while underground. In the past 24 hours, another 2 miners have died in 2 separate mines. The number of fatalities has significantly fallen from 220 in 2007. In 2016, it fell to 73. However, last year, it increased to 88 deaths. Why has this sudden spike occurred, and is enough really being done to safeguard our miners? All right, before we unpack this, Michael Marilia will help us understand what the mining sector actually provides the fiscus.
Thanks very much, Tullis. We're going to start with some figures on the contribution to GDP. This is a very important sector for South Africa's economy, but more importantly, important for the people who actually work in it and who make a living on a daily basis. So GDP contribution of 335 billion rand in 2017. That's roughly 7% of South Africa's total economy, and it equates in terms of tax revenues to roughly 19 billion rand. So mining really making a major contribution to the economy, an important sector of our broader economy as well. And this figure is perhaps the most important. 465,000 people making a living through the mining sector. As you can see there, that's almost 500,000 people and about 8% of all employed South Africans in 2017. But this is the crucial point, Tullis. For every 1 miner, there are roughly 10 dependents. So in other words, the mining sector may employ just over 450,000 workers, but there are 4.5 million dependents. So just to illustrate that, for every 1 miner, 10 people are relying on that person. And so the death of a miner can have devastating consequences. 1 miner dies and 10 people are no longer with a breadwinner. So just remember that when we consider the fact that we've now lost 74 miners this year alone. That's almost 750 people who could be in dire straits because they've now lost a breadwinner. Just giving you some context to this on the importance of this sector in the South African economy, and again, the people who rely on it to make a living.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Michael Marilia. Well, joining me now to unpack this is SAFTU's Zwelinze Mavavi, Minerals Council South Africa's Sizwe Phakathi, Mine Safety, Health Safety Council's Thabo Dube, and the Association of Mine Managers South Africa's Tom Vandenberg. Thank you so much for coming through for this discussion, gentlemen. Let me start with you, sir, and ask you, as one of the organizers of the Mine Health and Safety Summit, are you happy with the outcome? Did it live up to your expectations?
Thank you, Tula Sizwe. Before I start, I want to express our sincere condolences to the families of the miners who lost their lives in the past 2 days. When coming to the summit, is the summit that we actually arrange every 2 years to actually look at the state of health and safety in the mining industry, to actually review the progress that we are making as an industry in terms of achieving the milestones that we normally set ourselves. In 2014, we set ourselves very bold milestones in terms of making sure that we eliminate fatalities and injuries in the industry, and also to deal with various types of diseases like your silicosis, your noise-induced hearing loss, dealing with issues of HIV and AIDS and TB. It actually lived to the expectations, what we have expected to get. Unfortunate part is that there was a dent in terms of the success of the summit, in the sense that we lost 5 people within 2 days since we started.
Sure. You can see it as a dent, but perhaps also a reminder of how real the issues are. So, Zwelinze Mavavi, what is your sense? This particular summit, did it move us a bit further along in trying to ensure that every worker returns home at the end of the day?
Well, whenever people in a group come together and have a conversation, you're bound to have a hope that something more dramatic, progressive is going to come out of it. But we just worry about the numbers of summits we're having this year as the country. I mean, we're seeing just a phenomenal rise of summits, Job Summit, yesterday Health and Safety Summit, same day Health Summit, next week Investment Summit. It's just a year of summits. And if we were to look at what have they produced, that's what I think we're discussing. I think the death of 2 workers yesterday, right in the midst of yet another summit, is maybe an indication that that's not where your answer is. The answer, in our view, lies in us as a country making it punishable every time there is a death of a single worker.
I'm going to come back to you to actually probe you a bit further on that, on how realistic that can be and also how implementable it is. But let me bring in Tom Vandenberg and ask you, Tom, that, what's broken? How did we go from a situation where the trend was declining, from the high figures of the 90s and the years before 1991 of the 600s, bringing it down to around 200 by 2004, and even coming down further, and then suddenly last year we see the spike. What are you, as role players in mining, what are you doing differently that's not working now?
So up until recently we did quite a bit of work around leadership and capacitating people and making sure that through all levels people were capacitated in the industry. We spent a lot of time on training and getting people to really understand what are the threats and the risks that they're faced with. Obviously the economical downturn has had its impact as well.
Yep.
From a point of view where you've had the impact of the actual economy and people's minds where they're actually not at work. So trying to get people's minds focused back onto work again and not enter areas where they shouldn't be entering. So giving them the right to refuse to enter areas that they should not be entering would be important, and that's where we're trying to focus. Potentially, you want to spend more time. The regulator has been doing a lot of work to make sure that the mines actually comply. So it's been good from that point of view. But I would suggest, going forward, how do we build capacity in our people to understand the risks that they're dealing with on a daily basis?
Sizwe Phakathi, let me bring you in here. Draw the line for me between what Tom is mentioning, the kind of pressure that the industry finds itself under. I mean, 9.1% decline in the last quarter. That's huge, and it's one of the key sectors in our economy. How does that then play into the safety picture where production is under pressure? How does that then factor in terms of affecting safety?
Thanks to Sizwe. I concur with Tom with the sentiments that he has shared. However, the level of production is not an excuse for us to be in this kind of situation where we have a crisis of fatalities. So we know that safer operations are productive operations. Really, by having this poor run in our safety performance is a great concern. There's no other way that we can say any worker has a right to go to work to come back having lost his or her life. So we are a caring industry. So on that note, I would also like to just share our deepest condolences to the employees that have lost their lives, and we understand the devastating impact of these fatalities and injuries on the loved ones, as we have seen that a number of families are depending on miners.
Lindsay Mafabi, I see you shaking your head as Sizwe is saying there that we are a caring industry, and just a few minutes ago you were talking about the need to make sure that people are prosecuted each time there's a death in the mines. Is that even practical, Lindsay Mafabi?
It is practical if we had a political will. Why not?
It assumes that the mine bosses are at fault, whereas in some instances
I can tell you,
proven otherwise.
We are insisting that every accident, in particular where there will be a proven negligence on the part of management, we should come down heavy against the CEOs and charge them for murder. The day they will fear going to prison, that will be the day that they will shift their priorities. Currently under pressure, they think that profit must be the top priority. The lives and the limbs of ordinary workers.
But how does that manifest
right
in terms of operations? The Health and Safety Act says
the market plan.
Are allowed to say this area is unsafe, I'm not going to work there. What are you alleging then?
Exactly. You must remember that we won ages ago. The paper accepts anything written on it. The fact that the Mines Health and Safety Act have always, for a number of years now, given a right to mine workers to refuse to go into a dangerous workplace, doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. There's issues of power relations that, unfortunately, the Act is not solving. That's why we're calling for the amendment of Section 23 in particular of that Act, not only to strengthen the regulations that will make sure that anyone who may force a mine worker to go into a dangerous workplace
Tom,
is punished.
Is there a situation where workers are forced to go work in dangerous areas? In your experience and knowledge, does this happen?
In our experience, it doesn't happen, but clearly there are cases where it could happen. You can't talk for every single type of event and where it takes place.
That's scary already. I mean, where it could happen. It means the loophole is there. It does exist.
Well, at the end of the day, an employer has the right to refuse. And no one's going to turn around and say to you, you will enter the working place. So we've had cases where people have refused to enter working places and have saved their lives in the process. In terms of the duress that people are placed under, I would think that you should have the ability to open up and tell your leadership and your management that we cannot do this work, it's unsafe to do.
Thabo, the gold sector leads, unfortunately, in terms of the number of people that have died in that particular sector. Almost every year it leads. And the kind of pressure we've seen, the kind of pressure that this particular sector is under, and also the unique circumstances that it operates under. Are there any interventions that can be done, starting with that particular sector? Because perhaps if we achieved a turnaround in that sector, we could go a long way in reducing the fatalities.
There are initiatives that we have in terms of addressing the challenges in the gold sector, mainly the issues of rock burst and seismicity, falls of ground. After the increased number of incidents and fatalities that we had and early this year and late last year, we have actually put together a task team that is going to look into how do you cap the fatalities that are relating to falls of ground and seismicity. Because if you look at the last 10 years, I think last 10 years, basically, we had almost about 80% reduction. I think as an industry, we've become very complacent in terms of the good things that we used to do in the past, in terms of managing those type of agencies that results in fatalities. The task team is made up of universities, especially the mining schools, the South African National Institute of Rock Engineers, and rock engineers and seismologists that are actually operating in the industry. It's still early days in terms of some of the initiatives, in terms of the effectiveness of the initiatives that they've come up with. One of the initiatives that we have, in terms of making sure that the industry is properly capacitated in terms of rock engineers. We've started the training program for rock engineers to replace a large number of them that are going to be retiring soon.
Sizwe, I mean, when we all, we say that we are concerned with the safety of mine workers and we want every worker to return home at the end of the day, we are striving for zero harm. Why does your industry tend to, at times be almost unwelcoming, if I can choose that word, of these inspections, these Section 54 inspections that are supposed to happen, under which, the potential outcome could be even recommendation for work stoppages. If it's unsafe, you should be welcoming it, that, let's stop the work altogether until we re-establish safety. What are the problems there in as far as the inspections and the stoppages that can be ordered by an inspector?
There are no problems with inspections. It's unfortunate that there's that perception that we are not supportive of Section 54s. In fact, we are very much supportive of Section 54s. There were instances where we had a different view, but it didn't really equate to disagreeing with Section 54s. We welcome Section 54s. They are an important part of our legislation, which we are proud of, which is a tripartite product, that Mine Health and Safety Act. So we support Section 54. In certain instances, we encourage our members as Minerals Council to issue Section 54s to themselves.
Does that happen?
It does happen in certain operations where companies can hold production. Let me just share with you as well the campaign that we just launched in August. Again, a campaign that arose out of our concern of this regression that actually started happening in the latter half of 2017. We launched what we call the National Health and Safety Day. So where we said companies need to observe health and safety and hold production and encourage workers to reflect on how important it is to withdraw and actually prioritize safety before production.
They hit you in the pocket, the stoppages when they happen, don't they? Leading to this perception that perhaps they're not really your favorite thing whenever they happen. I mean, for instance, the stoppages that happened at Kopanong mine, hit that company, Anglo Gold, some 9.5 million rand a day, it's estimated, during that stoppage. Yeah, so but you can't really say it doesn't hurt whenever an inspector says, stop the work.
Yeah, that does not hurt more than having to lose a life. So it's fine. Let's lose production, other than to having to lose it. That's what we stand for.
Look, the mining industry have a particular history in South Africa. It's one of the most verkramte, the most brutal, exploitative, the most oppressive, and the biggest beneficiary of the brutalization of the black workers in this country. That's the history of that industry. It is going to take many years to take that history away. Just to answer that question, how many of these 79 workers could come back today on earth if there's an opportunity?
74.
74.
Yeah.
To tell tales of how they pleaded that this is a dangerous place. But the boss said you have to go or face.
Well, something could be said about the strength of yourselves as
absolutely,
unions.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean,
there's one dimension that I want to bring into
absolutely
this discussion.
Not. This is not going to happen.
This 74 we're talking about doesn't even count the numbers of workers who perish in the so-called Zama mines.
The illegal mining operations.
The so-called illegal mining. That, in our view, should have long been regulated, and that and in order to stop those deaths. If you were to add those numbers of the so-called Zamazamas, you will find out that this industry remains the biggest killer of workers in this country.
Tom, talk to me about a separate matter that has to do with the deaths and illnesses that result from mining operations. So, I mean, so far we've only been talking about where there's, an incident that takes place at a mine and people die. But there are certain instances where the deaths actually occur way after the people have left the mine, situations such as silicosis, for example. Are we at least moving in the right direction in as far as that is concerned?
Yes, we've installed a lot of technology going through and atomizers in the areas of work areas. So that is to actually reduce the dust levels that people are experiencing. We've got much better dust monitors which pick up dust, and what we're doing is you're using real-time monitors today. So what actually happens is when the environment picks up dust, it'll automatically allay the dust so that you don't have further dust. Unfortunately, there were lots of people that were exposed as a legacy issue, which we have to deal with as an industry.
All right, Tom, let me pause you there and let's take a caller. We have a caller who prefers to remain anonymous. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, sir. I understand you're calling us from Phalaborwa.
Yes.
Talk to us.
Yeah, the problem is we have got Mine Health and Safety Act subsection 23, and that subsection 23, it says the worker must refuse a dangerous workplace, but does not continue tells at what must I do if the supervisor and the safety rep tells me that no, the place is safe, even if the place is not safe. The other issue that I want to comment is a seismic event whereby the technology does not show the worker, it shows management. And management does not tell the workers that there will be a seismic event. So we need the seismic event information on the lineup, whereby employees be able to see.
All right, there was a caller from Palaburu. Thabo, let me ask you to respond to that. I mean, it's only fair. We should all have the same picture of how safe is the environment into which we are going. He says this information is only available to management and they don't always share it with the workers.
Yes, we might have incidences where supervisors don't share that information with workers. But what we are trying to change in the industry is the culture that is there. Because for workers to be able to exercise that right to refuse to work in a dangerous place, and for supervisors to encourage the workers to actually do that, there need to be a culture change. It's something that we are actually working on. Even the deliberations today that we had, in fact yesterday, the deliberations that we had yesterday, one of the key topics was the right to refuse to work in the dangerous place.
Tom, you heard what the caller said, that the Health and Safety Act talks about the right to say no in terms of working in an unsafe environment, but doesn't say what then, what actions if the supervisor doesn't necessarily agree that you should not continue to work.
Yeah, I've never come across anyone being physically forced to work in an area. So there may be duress from a various areas, but it's not physically. So when you gamble with safety, you gamble with your life. And if you're going to push me to the edge, I have the right to turn around and say, I'm not going to do that.
I love how you carefully choose your words there, Tom. You've never come across a situation where people are physically forced to work where it's unsafe. What about incentives? Are people incentivized to work where it's unsafe?
So that is one of those areas of duress where you have to turn around and say to yourself, is it a duress that's actually pushed on a person? And economically, people that are not as well off as other people, they could be put in a position where they could take that chance. But again, I want to say, if you gamble with safety, you gamble your life. Don't take that chance.
On average, let's take maybe Tom, if I stick with you, let's take the gold sector. Operating in difficult conditions, the deepest mines about 4 kilometers underground, very different environment in as far as the heat temperature is concerned and also the pressure is concerned and the rock stability there. What is incentive? I mean, how much would you perhaps offer a worker to say, listen, I know it's risky, but production, we need to push it up?
Yeah, the incentives don't really work very much to that extent. So what we do is we normally package across the industry. They would package the incentives. There's a certain safety percentage that you have to achieve, and once you've achieved that, you can achieve then further production incentive. So it's got to do with basically your variable earnings. So you would have your fixed earnings that you'd earn on a monthly basis, and you'd be given a certain amount of variable earnings for the amount of production that was actually produced. It's not to the extent, and very much through the negotiations, the wage negotiations over the years, we've never landed up in a situation where you're only getting paid 80% variable earnings and you'll do anything just to earn your variable earnings.
All right, Tom, let's go to a caller. Mpo is calling us from Burgersfort. Go ahead, Mpo.
Yes, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. Please go ahead.
Well, for the mining to achieve this zero harm, it is only through the mechanization, which is actually they're exploring in some mines here in Burgersfort, for instance. So that will have a negative impact, especially the people like Vavi there, because he's going to lose members. The machines will do the work, right, which at the end of the day we want to have more people working there. So this thing of, how can I put?
All right, Mpo, we've got your thoughts. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Let's get final thoughts. You're going to lose your work. You will be put out of business by mechanization. Wrap that into your final thoughts.
Well, we should resist mechanization if it means worsening the crisis, number one, of South Africa already, where 9.7 people are unemployed. I think every effort must be made to retain a mining industry as a sunrise industry, as playing a critical role in the contribution towards the GDP that will employ and that must continue to employ the types of numbers that you put up initially. And that's where we're going to.
Sizwe, your final thoughts?
Yes, I mean, the issue of technology, I think that discussion has matured. And indeed, we support technology that does not really reduce jobs. We want job-preserving technology, and is one of the solutions, particularly in our deep-level mines. We have a project that is focusing on that. Behavior, let me just touch on the issue of behavior as well. We need to empower our frontline supervisors and employees. The issue of bonuses is one of the issues that we tackled at the summit in these past 2 days. So we need to revise our incentive scheme such that they encourage a desired behavior from our employees at the rock face.
Thabo, your final thoughts?
Just to add on what Sizwe was saying is that one of the things that we actually looked at is that how do we structure the bonus system so that there is also a health and safety aspect and also the productivity aspect. Those are the things that we've looked at. As Mine Health and Safety Council, we actually developed some guidelines in terms of assisting the mines, in terms of reviewing and developing the bonus system, so that at least we also make sure that if you don't work safe, your performance in whatever production area is not good, you get penalized for that. So that the focus is not only on productivity and production,
but also on safety.
Yes.
Tom, your final thoughts? Can we achieve zero harm?
In the years to come, yes, it's possible. Unfortunately, it's going to have a lot of ways to work through it with the Internet of Things, technology coming through the paces. So we'll see the new mines as we put the new mines into the South African industry. There will be different mines. There won't be the age-old mines like we know at the gold mines. In terms of technology, we'll put technology into our current mines. I think the one thing that people really need to do is also obey the rules. It's important that people understand that the rules are there for their safety. So at the end of the day, when you obey the rules, you actually look after your own life. So we find in areas that people don't always obey the rules, and you also have to then get the regulator involved to make sure that there's rule compliance.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming through and having this discussion with me, a critical discussion to have, really, if the mining sector is to continue to play the kind of role that it plays in our economy. Well, coming up next, Checkpoint looks at the Faro Park, a model touted to address South Africa's housing shortages. But many who benefited from the state-subsidized project face eviction as they accumulated huge debt with no assets. They now want government to intervene. And that's the show for tonight. I'll be back at 9 with more news.